Bonus content of Locked On Jayhawks. Lonnie Phelps declares for the NFL draft. We'll do a little emergency episode of Locked On Jayhawks here.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can hear me as well on Rock Chalk Sports Talk Monday through Friday from 3 to 6 on KLWN in Lawrence. Thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get any of your podcasts. Still normal shows. We're going to have our KU West Virginia preview coming out on tomorrow's show. I'm still going to be out Monday, so we'll recap that game coming up later next week. But wanted to get this out, emergency podcast, some content. Lonnie Phelps is declaring for the NFL draft. Before we get into it, this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, your bonus content, brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and soccer. They've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. So Lonnie Phelps going pro. He could have had another season in tow for Kansas next year, which would have been his final season of college football. Had a really strong season for Kansas. You bring him over from Miami of Ohio, where he was an all-MAC player, gets close to double-digit sacks as a member of the Red Hawks. And the question is, how is a guy going to play up against Big 12 competition? But it was clear from the get-go, he has the 3-sack game, 4 tackles for loss against Tennessee Tech, one of the best performances by an individual defensive player for Kansas all year, albeit against an FCS team. But it was clear right off the bat that this guy was a little bit different. And from that point on, for the final 11 games, the stats don't jump off the page. He was constantly getting tackles for loss. He had, from that point on, 4 sacks over the final 11 games. So it's not like you look at it and say, well, 4 sacks over 11 games, that's irreplaceable for Kansas. But when you add in the context, right, he was playing through a little bit of an injury at one point. He's getting double teamed every time. How many times did it feel like Lonnie Phelps got held and it wasn't called? There were also a couple other times where he could have had a sack, like you think to the Arkansas game, that he gets there. He has a great pass rush, but he just can't quite bring down a big mobile quarterback. Otherwise, the sack numbers go up even more. So it was pretty clear that Lonnie Phelps was your best defensive lineman this past season. He was arguably your best overall defensive player. I know Kobe Bryant was the one who got first team all Big 12, so maybe you'd argue him. If you want to argue him, that's fine. I think Craig Young's really good and had himself a solid season too. But for me, it's Lonnie Phelps or Kobe Bryant is your best defensive player. I guess Kenny Logan deserves to be in that conversation too. But I think Lonnie Phelps, because of the position he played too, pass rush, Kansas didn't really have a lot of other guys to do that, was your best player on the defensive side of the ball. And to not have that guy taking up those double teams, it's going to be hard to overcome for Kansas. You're losing your entire starting defensive line now. And you were already losing so much else with the depth and those other starters, that losing him too to go pro early certainly hurts there. Obviously, from the Lonnie side of things, you wish him best. I haven't seen him being like a first, second, or third round pick, but you know, he's a really good player. He'll have some good tape out there. If he works out well, maybe he's a guy that could be like a mid to late round draft pick and have himself a nice shot in the NFL. And you wish him the best. And it'd be cool to see up in 5 years, you look up and Lonnie Phelps is contributing in the NFL level the same way that we've seen guys like Dorrance Armstrong or Daniel Wise, who is now a member of the Chiefs practice squad. So from KU's perspective, you obviously lose so much. We've already seen them add a couple defensive line transfers from Minnesota. We saw him add Devin Phillips from Colorado State. Those certainly help, but Phillips is an interior guy. You need more help on the outside right now. You lose Malcolm Lee on the outside too. Now there's even more. We had our kind of KU football talk. There's even more pressure on guys to make that jump headed into this year, whether it's, you know, a Dean Miller, who is a former JUCO guy, or if it's a Davion Westmoreland or Demarion Alexander, to make that jump this next season, because now you're really going to be called upon to play meaningful time. And I was excited for this defensive end duo coming into the year because you could have Lonnie Phelps and Jereme Robinson. Robinson, someone's I'm very high on that could have a breakout year. Over the final, I guess, what would that be, 7 or 8 games? So from October 1st on, so I think that'll be the final 9 games, maybe actually with the bowl game. From October 1st on, Phelps had 5.5 tackles for loss. Jereme Robinson had 6. And again, there's the context there. Phelps had to deal with a bunch of double teams and dealing with some injury stuff. My point in bringing that up isn't to say that Jereme Robinson was better than Phelps. No, I just said Phelps was like your best defensive player. It's to say that, with Jereme Robinson, he had a really good back half of the season. He had a couple sacks against Oklahoma State. He had a big forced fumble against Baylor. He was a really good player for you. And so you're still going to have really good players on this defense. Kobe Bryant is a really good corner, and he's going to be an upperclassman next year. Craig Young coming back in another year in his system. I'm excited what he can do. Kenny Logan back for another year. You have your top 3 corners, your top 3 safeties. You bring back some of your other linebackers, even though you've had questions there to have more experience. There are some players you can be excited about, but you really need Jereme Robinson to have that breakout year, as I kind of expect that he can have and that he should have. But now the problem is, even if Jereme Robinson has that breakout year at the defensive end position, you're still like, okay, but what about the other guy, right? Who's going to be that other guy that fills in? I would imagine this is now going to be a position that Kansas is going to try to hammer in the transfer portal and try to find, because they found Lonnie Phelps last year, try to find that next Lonnie Phelps for this next season. That's going to be imperative for this team to be successful next year, because when you think about next year, you bring back so much on the offensive side of the ball. This should be a really good offensive team. It just should. As far as the team impact goes for the defense, I'm curious how that's going to affect things. We'll get to that in just a second. This extra episode of Locked On Jayhawks brought to you by Built Bar. You got to try this. I'm talking about Built Bar's new reimagined flavors: cookie dough topper, coconut brownie bar, coconut brownie topper. They've got white chocolate peppermint granola too. It's Built's take on the granola bar, so it's more filling and still insanely tasty. And candy cane brownie puff. Built Puffs are like biting into the universe's most delicious cloud. First off, for anyone who hasn't tried Built Bars before, they're literally the best tasting protein bars ever built. Just sink your teeth into that first bite and it'll change your life forever. And the magical, wonderful time afterwards, you're probably wondering which new flavor is my favorite. An unanswerable question, to say the least. They're all unbelievable and they're all different. And so you just got to try it yourself. Built. Get 15% off your order right now using code LOCKEDON15 at built.com. That's LOCKEDON15 at built.com. So the team impact for Kansas, bringing back so much on offense, does give you a little bit more leeway for what you can do on the defensive side of the ball here. But for Kansas, you do go 6-6. You have a couple close wins in there to where the defense, as much as they struggled at different points this year, and especially at the back end of the season, they still improved by over a touchdown from where they were a season ago. You have to keep that momentum going forward. If you want to take that next step, you want to get back to a bowl game, you want to win even more games, you want to win 7, 8, maybe even 9 games, defense has got to probably improve by another touchdown, and then you need the offense to be just as good, if not better, than it was this season. Maybe just as good, but with a fully healthy season from Jalen Daniels. Though the news that Jason Bean could be coming back, kind of posted a interesting message on Instagram, certainly helps you there in case Jalen does get hurt again. So with Lonnie Phelps gone, you now have serious questions of, will this defense be even just as good as it was this past season when it wasn't good enough to win more than 6 games? And at the very least now, if you can somehow replace that with other players like Kobe Bryant coming back and other players getting better and some transfers you brought in, maybe more depth, then maybe you're just as good. But is that enough? I don't think it is. So now the challenge for KU is pretty tough, and it is on everyone else to get better, because you're losing arguably your best player. Again, if you want to argue Kobe Bryant, I'm fine with that. So at that point, your second best player on the defensive side of the ball. That's a lot to make up. That's asking other players to really step up for you. Doesn't mean they can't do it. They absolutely can, but now that's on them in the offseason, and now we'll see what the coaching staff can do if they can bring in another, impact player on that defensive line, because right now that is kind of missing from this Kansas defense, and you do have your worries for everything. Looks like with all these starters coming back, this Kansas team should be better. Like I said, my expectation for this team is to win 7 or more games next season. I think that's fair expectation. You bring all these starters back. You won 6 last year. Why would you not be better? But the avenue for them being just the same or being worse and missing out on a bowl game and taking a slight step back is that the defense does not get better. It regresses a little bit, and the offense is maybe just as good, or you have more injuries, or teams with full offseason of tape figure out the offense just a little bit more, and so you drop down a few more points per game, or you have more turnovers offensively, like you have less fumble luck with all the ones that KU recovered, and then all of a sudden the defense isn't better, it's worse because you lose a guy like Lonnie Phelps, and now all of a sudden that's where you are. I'm not saying that's going to happen. That's kind of the doomsday scenario. I still expect this team to be better than they were last year overall, because I do expect improvement from guys and other additions on the Kansas staff, but it made everything a lot harder now that Lonnie Phelps is going to be going pro. But for him individually, good luck moving forward, and you hope that he has a promising NFL career. That's going to do it for this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. I'm Derek Johnson. You can catch me on Rock Chalk Sports Talk. Thank you for subscribing to the show. Give us a 5-star review if you could, or a thumbs up on the YouTube page, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. See you for tomorrow's show, our KU West Virginia.